Thank you, Chair. Turning now to benefit take-up, I just wondered what you thought the costs and benefits to local authorities were of investing in benefit take-up campaigns.
So clearly there are certain benefits which we as local authorities are responsible for, and that is very clear, and we encourage those. There are certain benefits which we aren't responsible for, pension credits, and therefore it's much more difficult to get the information to be able to lead a benefit take-up campaign. So I'm sure we'll come on to data and information a bit later, but that's critical. We've got to take away some of the barriers to share that information. From us as local authorities, though, we represent our communities and our people. So, of course, we want really to ensure that they've got the proper funding to be able to lead fulfilling lives. And I could give you various examples of places where, particularly over the course of the last year, on winter fuel allowance, a lot of work has been done in terms of benefit take-up campaigns. And I would stress again, that can't be done from Westminster. It can only be done at a local level, because I can tell you where all my community groups meet, I can tell you where my notice boards are, I can tell you where all the information flows in my area. Local authorities know that information. It's much more difficult if you try to do it on a national basis.
Anyone else have anything to say on that?
Yeah, sure. So it's probably helpful to say, so policy and practice obviously helps local authorities a lot with benefit take-up campaigns, and it's probably important to say kind of where that drive to do that work comes from initially, and then I can talk a bit about the technicalities and how to improve it. So my experience in this space, and the reason I work in social security, is because I was let go from a role in 2000, a long time ago now, 2007, and had to claim benefits myself. No one told me about housing benefit at the time. I was renting in London. It's an incredibly difficult position to be in. You find out later kind of one part of the system doesn't speak to the other part of the system. It's a whole range of benefits, each of which have their own rules, which makes it incredibly difficult to navigate. And honestly, I've been pulling at that thread ever since, and sort of this is where I've ended up. So that's kind of why we do this work. It's important to help people navigate the system, because it's far more complex than it needs to be. Universal credit was an effort to bring it together, but actually other parts of the system have become more complex at the same time, and helping people to navigate that is a really important role. So I think it's important to know where that comes from. The other kind of outside of my own personal motivations, the reason it's critical is because when you look at kind of people that are at the sharpest end, living in near destitution or destitution, one of the simplest things you can do is help them access benefits and support that they should be claiming anyway. Effectively, we're sort of relying on the inefficiency of the system, when actually if the system just worked more efficiently, you could probably fine-tune it and target support much more effectively. And obviously this is an evidence session on pensioner poverty, but I think again, you can't really look at pensioner poverty in isolation. The same principles apply to working age households and obviously to child poverty as well. And then I think the final point to talk about in terms of kind of maybe the local role in this versus the national role, I think there's kind of a transactional approach that can be taken at scale using data, but there's a much more transformational approach that can be taken at a local authority level. And I think the impact and effectiveness we've seen from really well-run local campaigns that, again, are able to innovate and build upon each other to deliver quite substantial differences in the level to which people respond to these take-up campaigns has been it's quite substantial. So when we first started running take-up campaigns with the local authorities, we were getting sort of maybe 14% response rates. The average is now 30%, with the best performing getting well above 40% in terms of response rates to some of these campaigns. Again, that's down to better targeting, but it's also down to better the way the letters are worded, the way follow-on support is carried out, so whether or not there are follow-up phone calls and other things. And we ran a campaign, again, slightly outside of the pensioner remit, but there was a piece on attendance allowance, and again, stay within the remit. We ran a take-up campaign on attendance allowance, and again, the response we had from one person who helped someone come in and complete an application was just incredibly powerful. Like, they've got the money now to get to the appointments and do a little bit more besides, which they frankly didn't have before. And again, going back into sort of child poverty for a second, we ran a Healthy Start take-up campaign through text message, and people could follow up and give a survey response. And the response was kind of genuinely moving in the context of, I've got enough money to feed my baby. Like, it's genuinely making that much difference to people, which is why I think it matters that it happens. And I think that the question is, how do you get national approaches and national kind of maybe approaches to using data effectively working really well with the local efforts on the ground, which I think is where you get the difference between, or you get the benefits of both scale and improving impact and innovation, which again just happens much more at local level.